Injection.org podcast coming your way. This is number 358. Another compound episode, guys, but we're going to talk about injection techniques for this compound episode. So this is going to be a cool one. Got a lot of people calling in about injecting. So Stevesmi here and Rick. What's up, man?
Hey, what's up, Steve? What's up, guys? How's everybody doing out there?
Yes. So we got a lot of topics to hit on this. Let's first start with a story. Let's talk about the first time we injected. So my story was, I was trying to inject 250 milligrams of sustanin, and my dumb ass, instead of injecting 250 milligrams of sustanin, I put in the wrong amount in the syringe because I was so damn nervous that I put in twice that amount. So I put in 500 milligrams. And if you've ever injected 500 milligrams of sustanin, that thing really, really has a lot of post-injection pain. So, and I was like trying to figure out how to inject. I was using a 23 gauge needle, which is pretty damn thick. And we're going to talk about needle sizes later. And I'm like sitting there like, how am I supposed to do this? How am I supposed to do this? I kept telling myself, look, if I want to reach my goals, I got to do this. I got to do this. You know, I want to reach my goals. I want to get stronger. I want to get bigger, you know? So I kept attempting the injection and I kept chickening out. So finally I was like, you know what? I'm going to inject in my delt. I went into a closet and I kind of sat down or lay down under the closet. And then I like kind of put my shoulder to one side and then I injected myself into there. And gosh, I didn't even feel a thing. And then the next day, oh my gosh, it hurt so much. It felt like I got hit by a baseball bat. So yeah, that was it. And then I realized, oh my God, I had injected twice the amount of sustanin I meant to. Instead of just 250, I injected 500 because I was so damn nervous. I kept, messing around with it. And I've had 250 set up and I was like, no, this isn't right. It's supposed to be 500, twice this. And I thought I was injecting 250. So that was my first injection. Pretty damn nervous, very, very shaky. And I think that contributed to the pain that I was experiencing. So Rick, tell us, do you have a story about your first time?
I didn't have much in the way of injection pain or anything. I was on elitefitness.com at the time. So I was really well prepared for what the injection was going to be like. But I got my stuff, right? I got my stuff from different parts of the world. And I lived in a basement apartment with my dad at the time. So I was trying to take my shot without my father finding out. Like I was really amped up to get it done. So I locked myself in the bathroom and I actually start trying to get the needle prepped up. And it took me a long time to get the needle ready. I mean, I had a small multi-dose vial of Ganabol 50. It was 10 cc's. 10 cc's per 50 mgs. And I was trying to get the juice out of it and I fucking couldn't, bro. It really couldn't. It didn't dawn on me at the very moment. I was nervous. My dad was in the house that I needed to actually shoot some empty air into the vial to increase the air pressure so that it would draw pretty quickly. So I just sat there, man, just pulling on that plunger. I could see the bubbles coming in from around the needle right into the liquid. And it took like 20 minutes, 30 minutes just to load it up. My first amp that I tried to open, it cracked open in my hands. So then I had to kind of leave everything on the sink there, run out of the bathroom, go grab another amp, bring it back in. And my first injection was a mess. Once I got it all loaded up, then shooting it was pretty smooth. I'm okay with physical pain. I mean, it was nothing to me. But just getting it loaded up, it was a problem. I went right back to Elite Fitness, asked the guys about these issues, and it was basically explained to me like, hey, you need to either put a second needle in there that is not attached to a syringe, and that needle will let some air in, or you need to just push some air into the multi-dose vial so that you can withdraw. And as far as the amps, just score the neck with a little folded up piece of sandpaper. Score the neck, and then it'll snap right off. I mean, just running a little bit of sandpaper right around the neck, a little bit is enough to weaken it to where you could just snaps off with your fingers. But yeah, I mean, the injection itself wasn't a problem. The problem was getting the juice into the needle. It took a very, very long time.
All right, so that segues into the first topic, called injection techniques for less pain. So I have a couple pointers that I've learned over the years. One of the simplest things you can do, is kind of figure out which muscles like to be injected and which muscles don't. Some muscles hate being injected and it'll be in more pain than others. My example, my right quad doesn't mind being injected, but my left quad hates to. That's a perfect example. Another suggestion is heating the oil. Heat up the oil. You could boil it for like 20 seconds, and that really makes a difference. And then the third suggestion is mixing the oil. So if you have something that's a really maybe higher concentration that's going to cause more pip, you can dilute it in the syringe with something else, like maybe some equipoise or some test sip or test E, which are smooth, or some deca, which is typically smooth. And that will kind of take the edge off, and kind of dilute it. So those are my 3 suggestions. I know I'm missing some, but I mean, I stick to those 3 things, and I usually don't have any issues. Rick, what am I missing there?
All right, I think we skipped one of the topics, a couple of topics that we agreed before the podcast. I think we're doing them out of order, but I'll follow you up on injection techniques for less pain. One is always use a fresh needle. Never use the same needle to draw out of the vial or to draw out of your amp that you do to shoot. These needles have a very tiny tip on them, and you do dull the needle a bit when it goes through the rubber plunger. Not only that, if the rubber plunger is exposed to the air, to the room, then you might pick up a little bit of bacteria on the needle that wasn't there before. Also, when you're drawing from an amp, you're probably putting that needle all the way at the bottom of that amp to get all of it out. Obviously, if you're with the weight of the needle in your hand, it's enough to actually just bend the tip of that needle a little bit. So you'll get one of those shots where you're pushing the needle in and the skin bends inward until it pops right in. And that's usually a good sign of a dull needle. You want that needle to push right in and not to have a lot of your skin move or too much when the needle's going in, if you got a nice sharp needle. So that's one. 2, I don't like to leave any air at all. I always waste a little bit of juice in the syringe. I don't like to leave any air when I'm shooting. So I actually point the needle up at the sky and actually push it to where I leave a droplet or 2 of a steroid, let it run down the side of the needle. And I feel like it lubricates the shot a little bit. It lubricates the needle going in. When I just let that one little drop of steroid oil just kind of run down the head of the needle, that's it. So you just fresh new needle every time. Once you loaded up your syringe, put in a fresh new needle, make sure it doesn't touch anything. Make sure you don't hit the tip with anything, and then just point it up, get the last little bit of bubbles out, and let a little bit of that oil come down the sides of the needle. If you want maybe less pain, you could ice down the area. I don't like icing down the area because I don't like to watch the needle go in and I'm not feeling anything. It's a very odd, kind of weird feeling to me. But if you have sensitive skin, you don't like the feeling of it, just ice the area down. Ice it down long enough to where you put that needle in, you shoot, you're not gonna feel anything. Some guys think they have a lesser chance of getting a train cough because it kind of contracts everything in there, and so you're less likely to spear through a capillary or something with your needle as you're going in. So those are just 2 kind of quick suggestions there. Just keep the needle nice and sharp, fresh new needle every time. Use a different needle to draw than you do to shoot always. And a little bit of oil to lubricate the needle, I found does really well. Also, like Steve said, make sure you know which muscles in your body like to be injected and which ones don't. And once you find the muscles you like injecting and you're comfortable with it, you tend to have a lot less pain during your shots.
So you like it? You like to lubricate it before it goes in? All right, guys. So, yeah, I did go out of order, but we're going to go to the next one. It's water-based versus oils versus peptides. So, Rick, you want to go over this? I'm going to let you take the first stab at this one after you're done lubricating.
So I've never done an underground water-based steroid. All of the water-based steroids that I've done have been either farm grade or vet grade. And back in the day, when I used to get the good stuff, those water-based steroids would tend to crystallize a little bit and clump up. You have to shake them up. They'd be milky and they would clump up a little bit. So always warming them up under the faucet, warm water. It's a good way to help break up some of those crystals down. If you don't do that, sometimes like if you got the old Zambones, I can't remember what they're called now, but from even when you got stuff from Dencal or Quality Vet that was water-based Winstrol, you'd always, sometimes the needle would clog up a little bit. You get a little clump of crystal, jamming the needle on the way in or the way out, and just warming up the mixture, shaking up really nicely before you drew, before you shot, was just a really good way to make sure that that steroid or the crystalline hormone didn't clump up when you're in that water. Also, oil-based is usually pretty good and pretty decent. The only thing is you got to make sure to, it takes a little bit longer to draw and it takes a little bit longer to push in depending on the size of the needle. I don't recommend anybody mix water-based and oil-based steroids in the same needle. You don't do that. I probably wouldn't mix two water-based compounds together. I know some guys would mix their vitamin B12 shots along with their Winstrol. And in some cases, there could be a reaction that could cause things to clump up in there. So water-based, I would just shoot it straight. Oil-based, you can mix it without oils. Do not mix oil and water. When you shoot a water-based steroid, the water dissipates quite quickly of that muscle and it leaves the crystalline hormone in the depot. And you kind of want that. When you shoot an oil-based steroid, that oil depot takes a longer time to actually be absorbed and into the muscle. If you put water-based steroid and an oil-based steroid in the same needle, once you shoot it in the depot, you'll have little bubbles of water that are trapped in that oil that are not going to dissipate quickly. And those little bubbles of water could be a breeding ground for bacteria. It's body temperature and you've got a water trapped inside of the oil. The bacteria maybe won't grow in the oil, but the bacteria could grow in that water. So it creates a situation that is not intended. You're not supposed to have a little bubble of water inside of your muscle like that for extended periods of time being warmed up by your body. That could create a breeding ground for bacteria. So don't mix them together. Don't mix your water-based with any other water-based either. Just make sure if you're doing B12 and you're doing Winstrol and they're both water-based, different syringes, different injection sites. Oils, you can mix pretty much all the oils together, unless you're taking something like synthol. You really don't want to mix synthol with any steroids, in my opinion. But you can do it that way. I guess we'll get into injection sites a little bit later, right?
Yeah, definitely.
Okay. Okay, so that was my that's what I had to say about it.
Yeah, you covered it all. I know better than to inject Winstrol. I learned that. I studied it enough on the forums and asked people, and got that knowledge not to do it. Some guys don't mind it. I got a hold of some testosterone suspension, one time, and I did a couple shots of that, and was a really bad situation. And I won't even touch this stuff again. It's not for me. But if you're a tested athlete, I guess a water-based test suspension is going to be good because it's going to be in your body so fast. It's going to be hard to get busted for it. So that's the only advantage. I just don't recommend it. If you got Winstrol, drink the Winstrol or just take the oral tablets. Same thing. All right, guys. So the next one is mixing and reconstituting peptides. So I have a couple tips on this. Very important to realize with peptides, they're very fragile. What a peptide is, it's going to come in a vial. It's going to be like a powdery substance. So what you're going to want to do is you want to reconstitute it with some backwater, is what I recommend. And I recommend that over sterile water. And backwater, you can buy anywhere, Amazon, eBay, whatever. Any type of medical supply shop online sells backwater. But what you want to do with peptides, you want to store them properly even before you reconstitute them. So you want to put them in the fridge I would put them. A lot of people make the mistake, Rick, and they put them like when you open your fridge on the left side where you kind of put your eggs in that little slot. But I think it's a mistake to put your peptides there because you're opening and closing the fridge how many times a day? So what's going to end up happening is those peptides are going to get moved around. They may fall out and crack open. They're just being moved around. And with peptides, you want to treat them like a baby. You don't want to move them around. You don't want to do anything. So, and then you also with peptides, after you reconstitute them, you want to use them as soon as possible because after that point, they're going to start degrading. So use them as soon as possible. Something like HCG, for example, you want to use your HCG within 30 to 45 days after reconstituting. And anything off more than that, it's going to get degraded. Same thing with any peptide, no matter what you're using. Sooner you use it, the better. So, I mean, those are my advices when it comes to peptides. Rick, anything else to add, or you want to move on?
Yeah, peptides come in these little wafers, very like a little chunk broken off of wafer in the empty bile. And when you reconstitute it, you want to stick the needle in there and just slow drip the water, not on top of the peptide, mind you. You want to kind of slow drip the water onto the glass side and let it kind of flow into the peptide. You really want to treat it as something very delicate, like Steve said. You don't want to shake it around or any of that stuff. When it comes to peptides or human growth hormone, those are very complex molecules. I mean, they're basically folded up proteins compared to a steroid, which is just a ring structure, which is not very complex. If we were talking about like size and complexity, if you think of testosterone being about the size of a golf ball, then human growth hormone would be like the size of a car. And we get into it about with complexity as well. This is why the same testosterone will work on a horse, on a dog, on a human, but growth hormone, it's per animal. You know, the growth hormone on a horse will not have the same protein sequence or the same effects on a human or on a dog. So these are hormones that actually were developed and that our bodies evolved in different phases of evolution. So definitely you'd have to really treat these peptides and the human growth hormone as what they are. They're very complex structures that are easily broken if you change temperatures on them too quickly or if you shake them up. So it's very important to just you stick the tip of the needle in, just let drip by drip, right on the glass. You turn it sideways a little bit so that it's dripping right on the glass. You're letting it fill. You're letting it kind of drown the peptide and let it dissolve. You don't want to shoot the liquid right onto the peptide surface or even the drops. You don't want the drops falling right on top of the wafer and then shaking it. You don't want to do any of that stuff because that's all going to damage a good portion of that complex structure you got in there that you're trying to work with.
All right, guys. So that's really, really good advice. Next one is compounds that cause post-injection pain. And for me, I discussed sustanin at the beginning of the show. Sustanin, it's a blend of four testosterone esters, one of which is propionate. And, testosterone propionate is going to cause post-injection pain with most people. And then for me, Primo, I used Bayer pharmacy grade Primo. This was years ago. And that stuff is like motor oil. I mean, it barely even goes through a needle. I mean, so as soon as I inject it, I'm on the ground in pain. It's horrible. And then wherever I injected it is like hurt for like 2 or 3 days. So be careful with that. A lot of underground labs, Rick, they're coming out with these Primos and they use different types of oils with these Primos and they do a really good job of cutting down that post-injection pain. So, we're seeing that. And then, of course, I mentioned also the suspension. The suspension gave me really bad post-injection pain. Obviously, injecting Winstrol, post-injection pain. How about you, Rick? What did you deal with? That's pretty much it for me.
Yeah, the shorter esters tend to actually hurt more. Your acetates, your propionates tend to hurt more than if you have your undecanoates, your undecyclinates. Those tend to hurt less. So you're absolutely right. That's what I found. Also, the water-based stuff hurts quite a bit, and it leaves a sore spot. So those are pretty painful. So I think you covered it, man.
So we've covered lubrication, sticking it in, and then pain. So we're on a good we're on our way on this podcast, Rick. So the next one is places to shoot. So for the first injection I did was in my delt. And the reason I chose my delt is, I got wide shoulders. Even before I touched steroids, I had been lifting for years. So I had really wide shoulders. And when I walked through a door, my shoulders were so damn wide that it would hit, the door. And you guys know what I'm talking about. You guys who are like short and stocky like me, you know what I'm talking about. You guys who are tall and lanky probably hit your head on the top of the door. But for us short, stocky guys, we were more wide. Okay. So I'd hit my shoulder. So I was thought about the idea. It was like, look, I'm always banging my shoulder into walls and doors and stuff. So let me just inject in my shoulder. So, I like the delts. Another place I like is the pecs. And the thing I like about the pecs is you can hit both of your pecs simply by just looking down. You can hit your pecs. And then you can kind of just look down and inject them. So there isn't that awkwardness of hitting your glute, having to, look around or use a mirror to hit your glute. I used to do my glute and I use a mirror and it'd be like you turn the needle one way and in the mirror, it looks like you're turning it the other. It's kind of like the mirror is like playing tricks on you. So, I prefer places that I can see. I like the delts, the pecs, the quads, places I can see. So that's what I like. And very, very important too, to rotate injection spots. So a lot of guys just like hitting their glutes, right glute, left glute, right glute, left glute. You can't do that because over time you're going to develop scar tissue. And then one of these days you're going to inject in there and the needle is going to get stuck. And you're going to be like, what the heck is going on here? Well,
That crackle pop. Yeah, I have a good bit of scar tissue on my glutes because I'm a glute shooter. And basically, when I put the needle in, I hear popping noise. I feel it pop, pop, pop. This is because when it's going through scar tissue, it's a completely different structure, the way it feels on the needle than just going through fresh muscle. So developing scar tissue on areas that you shoot a lot is actually very, very accurate. It does happen a lot.
Yeah, so I mean, you have to rotate, guys. You're going to have to find different spots, especially on big cycles. If you're running big cycles, you're doing a lot of injections, you're doing a lot of injections frequently, you have to rotate because, developing scar tissue, someone asked on a forum, they're like, what happens if I develop scar tissue? Well, what's going to happen is you're going to build it up more and more and more. And it's going to get to the point where you're not going to be able to inject at all into that spot. And when you do inject, you're going to pull out and there's going to be blood because that scar tissue is going to basically break inside you, like what Rick was describing. And you're going to basically shoot up a bunch of blood. And that's basically, going to force you to use other spots. So you might as well just do it the right way and just rotate properly.
Yeah, rotating areas is a good idea. If you use something that is low concentration, high volume, maybe like a Ganabol 50, if you could get your hands on it, which is pretty tough now, shooting like in the bicep and the shoulders, you might get a little bit of a cosmetic effect out of it. Maybe not a lot, not a ton, but it'll do something. If you're using, high volume on some of these small muscles, might not be a bad idea. I'm not saying that the steroid is going to be anabolic right at the site because it won't, because anything with an ester cannot attach to androgen receptors and have an effect until the ester is cleaved off of the steroid by enzymes in your body. So even if you inject in your biceps, in your glutes, on your shoulders, the steroid is going to leave that area and float in your body. And then some enzymes are going to cleave off the ester, and then your body, then it can attach to androgen receptors. But whenever you are stretching the muscle fibers apart by putting the oil in there, by creating that depot, you have a little bit of a scar tissue that's going to develop in that empty space. It's something that happens. And, because the oils that we use kind of dissipate quickly enough so that scar tissue doesn't really form, maybe not as much as something like synthol, that lingers there way longer, so that you really do get a scar tissue effect. When it comes to that, you'll get a little bit of a cosmetic effect, in my opinion, if you shoot some of those really small muscles like a bicep or one of the tricep heads. But over time, over many cycles, especially if you do high volume stuff, you will.
Yeah, and there's a website called spotinjections.com. And it's pretty handy. It shows you all the different spots you can inject. So you guys can check out that website, and it'll help you out. All right, so the next one is how many cc's will each muscle take? So, you see some of these guys on social media, some of your buddies, Rick, on social media, who they'll load up a syringe with like 5 cc's because they're injecting so many steroids. These guys, they want to, I don't know. It's marketing. It's marketing. So they're running like 5 grams of steroids a week or something. So they have to inject that much at a time. Well, I don't think it's smart. When you inject that much into a muscle, you increase your chances of getting an abscess because that oil is going to want to clump. So what I recommend is maximum 2.5 cc's for a big muscle, 2.5 cc's. And then for a smaller muscle, 1 cc. So that would be my advice on that. There's the typical syringes are going to come in 3 cc's anyway. So you're not going to be able to inject more than 2.5 cc's. So that's probably, what you want to do if you're running a big cycle. And if you're running a smaller cycle, stick to 1 or 1.5 cc's. What do you think?
I exclusively only shoot glutes. It's a muscle that I'm used to shooting. I have good technique for getting it there, and I don't feel like it gives me too much pain. Whenever I've shot other groups, shoulders I might do once in a while, if not biceps, but I don't really take that much steroids. I'm not on cycle as much, where I can really do glutes most of the time. And look, I've gotten as much as 6 cc's in a glute, but that's doing that glute once every other week, meaning I might do 6 cc's on the left side, and then next week I might do 6 cc's on the other. I've never shot more than about 3 cc's on the shoulder. So I've tried every injection shot, even my chest, but I just fell into using my glutes. It's pretty much the only muscle I shoot. When you shoot the glute, right, you kind of in your head draw an imaginary cross on your glute, and you want to go with the upper outer quadrant. So the upper outer quadrant, outer being towards your hip, not towards your crack. So upper outer quadrant, is the place to go. And that's about, I've gotten as much as 6 cc's. I do some high volume stuff because I do like to get just legitimate veterinarian grade or legitimate human grade stuff. And most of it doesn't really come in these high concentrations that sources put out there. So if I'm trying to get the 200 milligrams of equipoise in a week, or 300 milligrams, that's already 4 to 6 cc's just an EQ. I get that Ganable 50, which is only 50 mgs per cc of equipoise. And I like that one in particular because it's legitimate veterinarian grade, and I could get it consistently. But yeah, it's high volume, and that's the way I do it.
All right, guys. The next one we're going to talk about is going to be, that's going to be the last one we're going to talk about is how to know if you have an infection. So yeah, to piggyback with what Rick just said earlier about pinning the triceps. I pinned the triceps, and after I did that, I noticed right off the bat, I started to get tissue irritation. And tissue irritation involved basically what would happen is it would get inflamed. And that's basically your body having a reaction. Your body's sending out inflammation to the muscle because it thinks that it's under attack. It doesn't like that you just stuck a needle in it. It may not like the compound that you injected because it thinks that compound is some type of foreign thing. So your body thinks it's being infected by something. So your body is going to react to it. So an infection is caused by either a situation like that, or it could be caused by bacteria. So that's actually your body causing that fever, causing that redness, Okay. It's not the actual, infection that causes it. Does that make sense? It's kind of like a virus. A virus causes your immune system to react and you get side effects. Same thing. So you have to keep that in mind. So just because your muscle after injection or a day later or 2 days later gets red, gets inflamed, gets hot to the touch, doesn't mean you have a bacterial infection. And a lot of guys, they run to the doctor and the doctor hands them antibiotics, because that's what doctors do. They like to hand out drugs. They take the antibiotics and like 5 days later, oh, I'm cured. I feel better. Well, you could have just left it alone, maybe iced it down, not messed with it, and it would have went away after 5 days as well. Tissue irritation actually takes like 7 to 10 days to go away. So, that could happen. So it's very, very important not to just throw antibiotics at your body because you think you have an infection. You have to make sure it's an actual infection. And there's ways to tell that's an actual infection by going to a doctor and having him actually test it and see, do I have a bacterial infection? Do I have a surface bacterial infection where that bacteria is going to eat away, at the skin and grow and cause a issue down the line, so that's something that only a doctor can tell you. You can't really tell by looking at it, because a lot of times your body will trick you into thinking you have an infection. But I'm ranting a little bit. Rick, what do you think about this one? You're a big advocate of infections, like about people who are getting infections.
Yeah, I get a lot of guys that I work with, consult. I'll be the first call they make, like, Rick, I think I got an infection. And this is my whole thing on infections. So if you have just a bad injection that's painful, the pain will usually peak about 24 hours after the injection. That's about your peak pain, is about a day after. Then a day after that, it should get better. If it's just a bad injection, you'll tend to just get better day by day. Even if the pain lasts 3-4 days, on the second day, it'll be less painful than on the first day. And then on the third day, it'll be less painful than on the second day, and so on and so on. The only time that you kind of know you have an infection is when it just starts to get worse day by day. When the pain is not subsiding, when the swelling gets worse, that's when you kind of know there's an infection there. Because if you have a bacterial infection and there's some bacteria in there growing, it's not going to go away on its own. I mean, it could, but not right away. It'll get worse over days before your body can beat it back and make it get better. So the fact that you are day after day getting worse, that's a good sign that you have something wrong, some infection. Now, depending on how deep you went with the shot, you're going to be able to see by sight an infection. Here's a good, clear way to know if your shot is an infection, guys. It'll have a pretty dark outer ring with a pinkish, kind of reddish towards the middle a little bit, and right at the inside, right where the infection is, right in the middle of that infection, it'll be light color. It'll be very, very light colored. So that's a telltale sign and it'll be warm to the touch. That's a good sign that, holy shit, there's some bacteria, something in there growing that shouldn't be growing. It'll have a very light color, very discolored center. Then it'll be reddish around the discolored center, and you'll tend to have a fairly clear kind of dark ring around it. Like if you hit yourself against something, but in a very kind of circular-ish ring, with a little bit of pinkish coming in from that, and then you'll have a white center. Sometimes with a dot in the middle where the shot went in. You'll usually get this right at the shot. And this is if the injection was either shallow enough to where you'll see the infection right away, or if it's going enough days where it's just where it's just there. So that's a good, if you see that discolored center with going onto pinkish, onto a purplish ring, that's an infection. You need to get your ass to the doctor. And if you see it like that, chances are you might not be able to beat it back with antibiotics alone. You might need to get sliced open and have a doctor drain it if it got that bad. some infections, like I have a buddy of mine, God rest his soul, he actually had an infection on his quad, and his whole leg got big and tight. It wasn't just the injection site. Quads, they all those muscles kind of overlap in there, and then he just got like an infection like in between a couple of muscles, and he didn't have the typical kind of white center with a pinkish to purple ring. It just, his whole leg got swollen, and he had just a patch, a dark patch kind of where the injection was. So if the infection is deep enough, or very new, you might not see the pattern I'm telling you about, but you'll see it other ways. Anyway, one thing we didn't mention here is, you could shoot these steroids subcutaneously. You can just pinch a little bit of skin and fat, and actually shoot testosterone specifically right on the fat there, under the skin. This is not something that I've ever done, but I've seen it more recently in the last 5-7 years. Guys talking about this, just basically pinching a little bit of fatty skin and shooting their steroid right under the skin. I've seen it there, and I've heard about it, people doing it, and it's not something I've practiced myself, to be honest, but just something to throw out there for guys.
Yeah, you can. If it's a small amount and it's very infrequent, you can definitely get away with that. Some TRT clinics will inject half a cc once a week or once every other week, and you're good to go. I don't recommend it if you're running a regular cycle. It makes absolutely no sense, because you're going to get an abscess. You're injecting that much oil sub Q. That's what's going to happen. All right, guys, we covered all these topics, and that sums it up. So this was a great episode 358 for Stevesmi and Rick. We will talk to you next week with another Q&A. Have a good one.
Have a good one, Steve. Have a good one, guys.
Guys, this is the required legal disclaimer. We are only sharing our experience from years of steroid use. We are not doctors, and none of what we say should be regarded as medical advice. Always check with your doctor before taking any drugs or starting any training program.